Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Paige Atkins.
That was great, Mr. Moritz. Thank you so much for joining us today. So yesterday, General Pollitt talked about several initiatives that we collectively are pursuing to set the conditions for the future. And this morning, we've got a panel that we'll bring on stage that will focus on that future. And I'm very honored this morning to be sitting on the stage with my esteemed colleagues, to include Mr. Tony Montemarano, who is our component acquisition executive. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Montemarano. In addition, I want to introduce Mr. Dave Mihelcic, our Chief Technology Officer. And last but not least, our Chief Information Assurance Executive, Mr. Richard Hale. Please take a seat. So we're going to talk this morning more about the enterprise, as well as what we see in terms of critical future technologies to enable that enterprise and how we envision securing it in the future. But before we go into that, I want to take a step back and set some additional context. You know, many of us have been in the IT world for quite a long time. And I would say 10 to 15 years ago, we would have never predicted the diversity and complexity of the IT environment that our military faces today. And it's a challenge. And we talked yesterday about how important information and actionable information is to U.S. and coalition forces to be effective. And without it, lives are at risk. So we have an imperative to change, to get ahead of the IT curve. And it's unacceptable for us to look at the technology advances around the world today and to continue to do the same things that we've always done. And it's just not technology, it's also process, it's standardization, and it's really the convergence of all those elements that are so powerful. And if you've ever read Thomas Friedman's work on globalization, he talks about the most important force shaping global economics and politics is not the challenge of terrorism. It is a triple convergence of new players on a new playing field, developing new processes and habits of horizontal collaboration. And I want you to think about that for a minute, because that is the power to connect. And it is incumbent on all of us to leverage that power and provide that power to all of the men and women around the world that are protecting our nation and protecting each and every one of us in this audience. We can never forget why we are here. And that's why we're here on the stage today, is to talk about the future and ensure they have the capabilities in their hands to accomplish the mission. And with that, I'd like to turn it over first to Mr. Montemarano to talk about the enterprise.
Well, good morning. The concept for our conference today is enterprise within reach. What is the enterprise? We talk about the enterprise infrastructure. You're also talking about IT consolidation, and we also see acquisition reform hitting us. They're all very, very much related, if you will, so if I may take a couple of seconds to talk about that. When we talk about enterprise infrastructure, it's not enough to say, well, we're collapsing various technologies of the protocol stack. Okay? In point of fact, we're not, are we? Okay, we're still going to have a communications infrastructure, a computing infrastructure, an applications infrastructure. What we're trying to do is to present to the warfighter a single platform, a single cloud, whatever it may be, whatever the current jargon is. We're trying to present to the warfighter an environment that they can plug in, whether it be a wireless environment or a wired environment, and do business. And when I say warfighter, maybe it's the developer. Plug in And instead of having to worry about the server, the wires, the connectivity, et cetera, they just plug in and start working. All right? That's where we're going with the enterprise infrastructure. That's what we're trying to achieve. Now, for the last 4 months, I've had the opportunity to work for Mr. Kai on IT consolidation. In IT consolidation, what are we trying to do? We're kind of come to grips with the fact that the services, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marine Corps, the agencies, have also tried to address the enterprise infrastructure concept in their own ways. So really what the IT consolidation is trying to do is bring that together. So if you will, IT infrastructure, or enterprise infrastructure, is a qualitative collapsing of the environment, and then IT consolidation is a quantitative collapsing of the environment. Lastly, how does that relate to IT acquisition reform? We that are working on the enterprise infrastructure are taking technologies that are available today in industry and adapting them to military applications. So IT acquisition reform is about cutting back on the big programs and going incrementally. That fits perfectly with the enterprise infrastructure. We're incrementally evolving, iterating, consolidating. So with that, I'd like to turn over to my colleague, Mr. Dave Mihelcic.
Thank you. So as a senior leader in DISA, I'm invited to speak at many events pretty regularly, and we have a process inside the agency where if we build slides for an event, we have to send them through something called our Public Affairs Officer Review, where they go through and decide whether or not the content is appropriate, etc. And I figured out recently, actually a long time ago, that if I didn't do any slides, I could literally say anything I wanted, and there was no prior review. So last week when Ms. Atkins asked me what I was going to talk about, she asked for an email with some specifics. I declined to send her anything because I said there's a possibility she might not let me say these inflammatory things. Now, unfortunately, all the inflammatory things I wanted to say have actually been covered by previous speakers, including Lieutenant General Pollitt, including Mr. John Chambers and Mr. Paul Moritz. So I am going to give you 6 predictions, though. And these 6 predictions, I will say with 93% accuracy, will come to pass within 5 years. And if they don't, in 2016, on this very stage, you can come and see me and point out that the predictions didn't come to pass, and you can buy me a beer. So, first of all, and these are not very inflammatory at this point because you've actually heard them all, but I'll break it down just to put it in more concrete terms. In 5 years, we will not have PCs and workstations. Instead, we're going to have mobile devices, wireless mobile devices that will be used for all classification levels of processing. I'll go a little further. You'll have one device that will span unclassified, secret, and top secret, and based on geolocation and sensors that determine the environment it is working in, it will automatically switch between those environments to allow you to process data at those classification levels. When you get to your desk, you'll wirelessly dock with a keyboard and be able to have a full-featured environment. When you're in Starbucks, you'll use your fingers and it's nice 3D graphics, and you'll still be able to get your job done. And from a security point of view, not only will that device have our PKI certificates embedded in it, but it will automatically detect through biometrics who the user is through things like heart rate, respiration, and even olfactory factors. So it'll use your smell to determine you're you. Our DISN, the Defense Information Systems Network, will go from at least a user access point of view, primarily wired to a wireless. We'll have persistent IP-based SATCOM where a user will just point and access the DISN, as well as a combination of military and commercial 802.11 and 4G wireless access points. So you will no longer have to plug your laptop in. You'll be able to go anywhere and access the gig wirelessly. SIPRNet, NIPRNet, and JWICs will cease to be. Instead, we'll have 4 mission-focused networks, one that's Intel, covering SCI to secret, one that's C2, which will cover secret down to unclassified, logistics, primarily unclassified, and finally an administrative network. And if you don't believe these, I actually have mathematical proofs of the next 3 predictions, so I'm going to give you those proofs. The cost of computing will go down by 1 order of magnitude, by 10 times. The mathematical proof is today it's about $22,000 for an operating instance of a Linux server in one of our decks, based on the fact that we can buy through cloud computing commercially an OE for $437 a year. That's without any administrative support, but in our best our best support environments, we can have system administrators who can handle 100 OEs. That's roughly $2,000 a year. We'll be able to deliver that same OE for $2,400 a year, so a factor of 10 savings. Certification and accreditation will have a 2 order of magnitude improvement, so we'll have 100 times improvement there. On average today, when I develop an application, it takes about a week for our certifiers to do their tests, about a week to write their report, and about 2 weeks for them to get through the formal approval process. So about 30 days, not bad. But out on the floor today, my guys at the Forge.mil booth can talk to you about how they can do automated conformance testing, and if we can just change some of the cultural factors of human approvals versus machine approvals, we can take that same process down to about 8 hours, 100 times improvement, 2 orders of magnitude. And finally, my last prediction is on application development. We're going to see a 3 order of magnitude speed improvement in application development, more than 1,000 times. And my proof is this: large DoD software systems with block release cycles take about 18 months between major releases. That's 12,960 hours. Flickr, which is a photo sharing site that's on the internet today, which uses continuous integration, test, and release mechanisms, they release their system on average about 10 times a day. So on average, about 3 hours. So that's a 4,300 times improvement, at least 3 orders of magnitude. So there's my 6 predictions. I hope you wrote them all down, because they're all going to come true within 5 years.
Wow. So how do I follow that? Clearly, clearly there's a lot of work to be done before 2016.
Get busy, my friend. Get busy.
And clearly the DoD program has been focused in the information assurance world on the wrong problem. We're going to get right to work on smell security. This is why Dave wouldn't tell me what he was going to talk about either, I suppose. So one of the things that really does differentiate DoD, and has to for a while, but shouldn't forever, is the fact that we've got to work in the face of whatever comes. So this business of mission assurance or mission dependability in the face of cyber warfare by a capable adversary is a problem that we've got to solve. Now again, eventually the rest of the world has to solve this problem too. Our critical infrastructure has to be dependable in the face of the same kind of threat. But right now, we've got to get DoD's house in order, and we've got to be able to work in a realistic operational environment. So security hasn't been cast as this mission assurance or dependability problem very well. Hence, we still have these paper-based certification and accreditation processes that haven't yet caught up with the idea that everything is hooked to everything else. So job 1 in the DISA information assurance program and the DoD's is this business of mission assurance. Job 2 is giving commanders freedom of action. Dave made his prediction about these different mission networks, essentially. That's one of the things we're really struggling with. One of the combatant commanders needs to take an action in cyberspace, but because all this stuff's hooked together with the same policy, it affects some other combatant commander's mission in an adverse way. We got to move beyond that. So third thing that we're trying to get done is we're trying to improve safe sharing. Every single thing the department does and will ever do is as a coalition. We're automatically a coalition inside the department. We fight joint. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard. We also, again, in every operation that we've done, General Pollitt talked about the 6 operations we've been in simultaneously this year. They're all coalition ops. So this business of being able to improve sharing and improve it safely, have agile sharing so that we can set up when we have a new contingency and be ready to fight is our third problem. And the fourth problem is we still need to be able to keep a secret sometimes, even though we're trying to share as broadly as possible. Yeah, that's a hard problem, and like some of Dave's predictions, that one makes my head spin occasionally. So in DISA, we have essentially 2 closely related and overlapping efforts in this enterprise security space. One is to make this platform that we've talked about dependable in the face of whatever comes. So this platform being the computing, the network, the core enterprise services and cybersecurity, that all has to work regardless. We're trying to make this platform for essentially two sets of customers. The warfighter, we also want to make this platform hide all the details of this dependability so application developers can very quickly, maybe not as quickly as Dave's predicting, but yeah, 10 times a day, I can release software because I know the platform is taking care of most of the security and the dependability problems for me. So that's problem one for DISA, is make this platform robust, take care, hide a lot of the details. Problem two, or the second part of our effort, is this business of doing enterprise-wide things for the whole department. So doing DISA's contribution to the entire department's mission assurance, et cetera. So we have a lot of enterprise work. All of the work that we do is teamed with other people in the department and outside industry. Everybody's critical to this. We don't do anything by ourselves. And I just want to mention a couple of things. And I don't have anything as radical as Dave's predictions. But one thing I'd like to mention is we're trying to drive out the way we do access control in DoD and replace it with something else. And the idea is we have all these accounts that are very local things. They inhibit our ability to get to things, and they cost a lot of money to set up, right? There's all this paper that's signed and faxed back and forth to get accounts on systems. Trying to get rid of all that and go to non-account-based access control for almost every information service in the department. And we're going to do that through the use of attribute-based access control. We're going to use those PKI credentials that you got on the unclassed net, and this is the year of the SIPRnet PKI, so we're going to have them on SIPR as well. And you'll present that credential to an information service, and it will go find out things about you, compare that to an enterprise policy, and then grant you access. No faxing, no nothing. So hopefully access control paperwork is going to go to zero as we move to this new form. So that's one thing that we've got to do. We'd like to get that moving aggressively over the next couple of years, and it's in the IT efficiencies plan Tony mentioned. One other thing I'd like to mention is we're zoning up and the network, computing, perimeter defenses so that we can support multiple policies at the same time. General Pollitt mentioned this when he gave his remarks, this idea that we've got to give the commander the ability to make choices in cyberspace, the way the commander makes mission risk decisions in other areas of warfighting, I think is fundamental to how the department has to go forward. So we're working with lots of you to develop this idea of these policy zones in the computing, the network. Virtualization allows us to do this efficiently. Please help us with this. One of the efforts is called the Defense Enterprise Security Architecture. An earlier piece of this was called DoD DMZ, so ask us about it and help us do this. This is going to be the framework that we use for server consolidation across the whole department. And then, you know, we have a huge program at DISA, so as many of you know, I can go on for a very long time about this. Just one thing I'd like to mention, because we're doing much more enterprise service and enterprise buys of information assurance capabilities, just the way we are in all other areas of DISA's efforts, we're very interested in standards and interoperability because we're going to automate all of this stuff, right? We are going to drive cost out by automating all this security and all this management and all this cyber attack detection, diagnosis, and reaction and configuring. So we need standards and interoperability across products, and we are working very hard to make sure that as we do enterprise things, we have multi-vendor options for virtually all the enterprise stuff we do. With that, I'll pass it back to Paige.
Thank you. I think that was a great discussion. We're going to open it up for Q&A, and I'm going to start with a question as folks move to the mics. But I wanted to ask each of our panel members, could you talk, if you were to identify the top challenge in the areas that you discuss, what would that top one challenge be? Tony?
Trying to pre-coordinate with the SPI director so I know what the first question was. She's there for me. Okay.
Do you want me to?
Okay, the top challenge that I see is it's okay not to succeed, and that bothers me intensely. We are within reach of succeeding in bringing an infrastructure together, an enterprise infrastructure together. We're in reach of bringing services and agencies to DISA together. Never in the history of IT, as I understand it, I guess I've been part of that history, a good part of it. Never have I seen the sixes of the world or the sixes of the military department coming together on the same frequency and saying, we've got to clean this up. We've got to make this more effective. So I believe the time is right. I believe we're close. It's within reach. The problem is that's what we have to hit on. People have to get religion and know that we can bring this stuff together and we can continue to improve the quality of service. We have to do that. And I think that's the main thing we've got to focus on.
Thanks, Tony. Dave?
So those 6 predictions I made, with the exception of one of them, the technology is all in place to do all of those things today. The one where we have some shortcomings are on the being able to use mobile devices for all classification levels. NSA does have an aggressive program, though, to look at bringing security to commercial mobile devices. So that is one technology gap that's worked. Everything else is within reach today. And so I'd hearken back to the question John Chambers asked Lieutenant General Pollitt during the plenary yesterday, and it had to do with culture. I think our biggest obstacle in making these aggressive gains in capability have to do with culture. So perhaps changes in our funding and operational environment provide us an opportunity, because drastic changes in the external environment often give you an opportunity to change culture and make these kind of dramatic changes, just like we made the change from mainframes to PCs, just like we made the change from signal and flag hoist to telegraphy and radio telephone.
I agree. Culture is a challenge and one of the hardest things, if not the hardest thing, to change. Richard?
Shoot, see, these guys already answered the question. Aligning DoD across all the pots of money in the information technology business so we can get to this enterprise and do this together, as opposed to competing with each other or overlapping with each other. And being inefficient and not having joint warfighting work right is the biggest challenge, right? So we all have to listen to each other and come together. I don't know what needs to be done to get the incentives lined up properly for doing that, but that's essential. And again, the budget doesn't give us much time to get that done.
Okay, I think we're going to head to the audience with a question. Let's go over here. Over here.
My name is Mark Cohen. I'm with BAE Systems. My questions refer to the topic of certification and accreditation. People who know me know that I am extremely passionate about information assurance and about my ultimate customer, the soldier, sailor, Marine, and airman in the field. Certification and accreditation, currently, the way the directives are written, are geared more for your fixed base, shore-operated, business-oriented, Windows-based systems. They are not geared for your mobile tactical and mobile strategic platforms. Also, the way we currently do CNA, every single device and piece of software has to get accredited. This is very expensive, very time-consuming. How do you see us being able to simplify systems accreditation and software accreditation? Because right now, God doesn't even have enough money to do everything that we're required to do.
See,
You want to take that one, or should I?
Dave is itching to answer this question. Go ahead.
So I can't give you a full answer, but part of this is we do need to highly automate this process. We need to then do machine regimented compliance checking, automated approvals. If there is some large deviance between the machine checking and what the compliance needs to be, we could have human intervention. Push the capability out to the network, And then if, in normal operations through our monitoring capabilities, we do detect a problem with that system, fix the problem. But don't take that system and wait 6 months until all of the human reviews and all of the, hand-wringing are completed. Get it online. Mr. Moritz talked about framework-based technologies. There are software developers out there who can build major systems in days or hours, but it takes months to get those systems then online and operational in the DoD. So it's a great question. It is not going to be an easy problem, but that is one of those things that we absolutely must address.
So let me put in a plug then for something that DISA and the military services and NSA and some of the interagency are doing together right now, which is trying to roll out, we've deployed all of this compliance monitoring, or at least we've deployed tools that can monitor compliance with many things. So we have HPSS, we have all these vulnerability scanners, we have lots of things on the network that can sense what's going on. So we're trying to roll out a thing called continuous monitoring and risk scoring as a way of doing away with essentially all post-deployment certification and accreditation, and instead moving to a model where we're watching how things are secured continuously. It's going to give us better situational awareness for making mission risk decisions, and it's also, again, going to simplify and drive cost out. So please help us with that. Again, this is new. It's just starting to roll out. And again, we hope that it's going to transform at least part of CNA over the next 18 months.
I'd like to make a comment related, but a little different. Right now, the department operates several hundred cross-domain solutions. And what we mean by that is connecting secret to non-secret. That is connecting secret to coalition, secret to the unclassified environment. Most of these solutions are sitting in the enclave environment. The average time to get certification and accreditation is 18 months. That's average. Some take much longer. Some take a little shorter. Okay? Right now, at the enterprise, we'll take those same solutions, and we're averaging, again, some up, some down, 4 months. So the point here to champion IT consolidation. This is an IT consolidation effort we currently have going on within the department. Let's do it together and at least address it in that fashion until Richard can fix the rest of the problem.
Okay, we'll take a question on the middle row.
Thank you. Good morning, Al Mink, SRA International. General Pollitt introduced us with the power to connect, but we've heard just as much today about the E word, enterprise. Came up a couple times, in fact, with the panel today. So my two questions to you all deal with the E word and enterprise. Specifically, as you work the enterprise initiatives that you've talked about already today, what do you see being the obstacles? Cultural, Mr. Hale mentioned programmatics, for example, technical. And then the corollary to that is, as you look at a portfolio of enterprise for DoD, perhaps with DISA in the center, what's missing in your vision of enterprise as you start to work one piece and you realize the other pieces don't fit? For example, we heard about enterprise email, and then we heard about handling the desktop and enterprise level. So there's a lot of interrelated pieces. So those are the two questions. What are the real obstacles from the as-is to the to-be, and what's really missing in a portfolio of enterprises, particularly those that industry might help?
Let me start. I would say one of the main obstacles we have, and the number one obstacles we have, is just financial, okay? In two ways. One way is in order to improve, you need to invest, and investment dollars are going to be scarce as the time goes on. But the other way is as General Pollitt mentioned, the funding model. Right now, inside of DISA alone, we have multiple funding models. Defense Working Capital Fund fee-for-service, Defense Working Capital Fund subscription service, and then we have appropriated. Okay? Services have comparable problems as well. Okay? How do we reconcile that? We have to address the funding model, because right now, everybody's going to be hugging the dollars in any way, and they're going to be looking at it from their own perspective. And as long as they do that, you're not going to be able to bring it together. Okay? The other thing I see as far as an obstacle is concerned is security. Okay? I have a huge problem in the world of security. When in the first element of IT consolidation is networks, bringing the multiple networks together. There are not a lot of physical networks out there. There are a lot of logical networks. many of which exist because of security boundaries, because we can't trust one another. Okay, so that's the other one, financial and security. The second question you had, I defer to my buddies for that.
So I think that part of the challenge in reaching this enterprise consolidation is we actually have to demonstrate to the end user there's some new capability in it for them. They really don't care that there's cost savings in the back end. That's good, budgets are declining, but we need to show them that they get a demonstrable benefit. So I'm an early adopter of technologies. I adopt failed technologies. I used to have an Atari 1040 computer, if you remember that one, and an Amiga computer. And recently I went out and bought a Google Chromebook. And if you've never used a Chromebook, it's basically a thin client with wireless in it, and it's got nothing on it. Everything is in the cloud. And at first I said, boy, this is a big mistake. I paid $500 for this thing, and all it does is allow me to connect to the cloud. But then I started to see some of the interesting emergent capabilities of that device, like when I log out of that laptop, I actually close it and go over to my PC and then use my Google Chrome browser, automatically the entire state of everything I was doing is saved and immediately available over there. All of my data is up in the cloud. I can collaborate with people in documents on real time in the cloud. And I noticed one day my kids were using this thing. It's like, I didn't give you an account on that. How are you using it? It's like, Dad, anybody who has a Gmail account automatically has been provisioned to the Google Cloud, and they can pick up your Google Chromebook or anybody's Google Chromebook and access the cloud. So, you know, those are the kind of emergent capabilities, if we put those into an operational context, that a warfighter might find beneficial. So when we move to the enterprise, we got to figure out what those emergent capabilities are and make them useful to the warfighter in an operational context.
And I'll add that when we think about gaps, we can't just focus on the technology. As we've learned through enterprise email, we're identifying gaps and seams that are operationally focused, TTPs, other activities that we need to peel back and understand and correct as we move forward into the cloud and expanding the enterprise capabilities. Do you want to add anything?
See, everybody answered already. So I vote with Tony. I think the security problems, you know, essentially nothing yet is still designed to work properly in the face of cyber warfare by a capable adversary, right? We're doing consumer-grade stuff and hoping that we can get those dependability properties. This business of moving to enterprise allows us to put more mass on the problem. We've discovered that with enterprise email, problems that have festered throughout the department on how certain IT things work. Performance problems are starting to be solved now for Army, between Army and DISA, because we actually have enough folks working them. So I think we're going to get that same kind of benefit from consolidating, working together on some of this stuff, but I think at the end of the day, the security stuff is still going to inhibit us sometimes. We won't get, the lowest mission risk point won't be quick deployment of something always. It may just be doing something more carefully, but something that gives us more dependability when the chips are down.
Okay, we'll take a couple more questions. Let's go back over to this side.
Good morning. Bill Stewart with Mihelcic. When you talk about your challenges, how are you dealing with the challenge that today you have to handle much more information than you've ever had to handle before, and tomorrow it's going to be even more than that? At the same time, increasingly, you have to handle new kinds of information that you haven't had to work with in the past.
I think you should take that one. That's strategic.
I think the CTO ought to take it.
So I'll take a stab at that one. Clearly we need better machine support in this. Correlation is something we've been doing for years in command and control, taking lots of what appear to be disparate data and making sense out of it so that there's 15,000 reports that it turns out all those reports correlate down to one object. So we have to have better machine-aided correlation across the spectrum of all things we do, and the cloud can help us with that. And the other piece is going to be geospatial. You know, we are essentially visually oriented creatures, so we got to put everything into a visual context for our user. That is very important. So take and use the machines to correlate and put it in a visual context so that our users can best absorb that data.
And then in the cyber business, we're making some bets on highly scalable, either commercial or open source technologies that have been proved in other sort of massive data applications like Google's. So we're making bets on cloud and on centralization only because we have no other way to handle the massive amounts of data. So we're starting to be able to write analytics across huge quantities of data because we're adopting some of these technologies other folks have pioneered.
So forgive me for being confrontational, but the purpose of this partnership conference is for us to ask you that question. Okay, we need you to tell us how do we
That was a
with
loaded
this?
question. That guy was from MarkLogic. We know what they build. They build XML databases that can help you with that problem,
Okay,
Tony.
there you go. There you go.
Okay, we'll head back to the middle row.
Dan O'Connell from Kinetics Incorporated. Speaking just from a practical standpoint, from those in the industry who are trying to support you, I mean, your true priorities end up being defined by what you actually spend your money on. And we understand there are challenges with the funding models, but do you have any predictions about what your real budgeting priorities are going to be for 2012, 2013?
Well, I think, I'll start. So for the folks that are supporting DISA on a day in and day out basis, we do have a campaign plan. Most of you or many of you are familiar with that. And that lays out our strategy for moving forward, in particular helps us define our priorities and the actions and tasks associated with those priorities that we use to help shape our budget process internally to the agency and working through the OSD processes as well. And everything that we've talked about today, particularly as we look toward the enterprise infrastructure and integrating across the components of that infrastructure, the communications, computing, enterprise services, information assurance, and NetOps capabilities, is where we are focused to enable those activities. And some of that is further defined in our campaign plan, of which a publicly releasable summary of that is available on the web as well on DISA.mil. So I encourage folks to take a look at that for the initial framework. And then you will also hear, for those that stay for the forecast to industry that will start following this panel, you'll hear more specifics about opportunities across all of our areas. And I encourage you to stay for that discussion, and that will give you some insight in terms of specific opportunities nearer term.
Just to make sure it's understood, the vast majority of DISA's budget is dedicated to operations, sustaining those infrastructures that we have deployed today. A little bit of iteration there, but the vast majority is to try to keep those things operating. We've got real activities going on right now. They have to be always on as part of our guiding principle. So that's where the bulk of our money. Our discretionary funds are a lot lower.
So one thing I'd like to add is I do believe we're going to see decreasing budgets, federal-wide, DoD-wide, and within the IT portfolios. And so I think some of these things that I talked about having to drive efficiency in our repeatable processes are what are going to be critical. So it may not lead to new spend. In fact, it may lead to reduced spend. And that's going to be our goal, to take money out of that, run the business, and put it back into innovating new capabilities for the warfighter.
Absolutely. Any other questions? If not, we'll go ahead and close the session since we're running a little bit late this morning. And with that, I thank everybody's patience and engagement. And please, I want to encourage folks to participate in the Forecast Industry session again that will come after the break. And that will give you additional insight in terms of specific opportunities that industry can help us on. Thank you very much.